I went home and driving home, like, well, I just got fired. The first time ever that no one had said it, but I just got fired. And I kind of like doom scrolled social media for 5 days trying to figure out, I knew I would go back to residential real estate because I never really gave it up. I was still doing deals and stuff. But I saw a Gary Vee video and it was just like, you should become the social media mayor of your town and this is how you should do real estate. And I think his sister was in real estate at the time, so he was doing the content around that. And it just struck a chord with me. I'm like, I'm always on my phone. Like, why don't I try and do something that turns it into a business and build a pipeline through social media?
Well, I'm excited to have Mike Hearne here sitting in the seat in the Entrepreneur Studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. The question that came to my mind, though, was like, you got to tell us how a 33-year-old guy from Wales ends up in Oklahoma.
Oh, I'm not in there yet.
Oh, okay.
No, not yet. They're just a sponsor.
Oh, okay,
but I work very closely with them. Yeah, the ultimate goal, of course, one day to be in the Hall of Fame and have that medallion around me. Oh, yeah, would be a dream. From working with them to being in it is what I tell people. It's the road to like 10,000 episodes, maybe. But yeah, they've been a sponsor since 2020. Got it. Kind of got hooked up with them, and I just reached out to them one day. I saw their tagline. Their tagline's sharing Oklahoma's story through its people. And that's what I was doing with the podcast, and I'd done 200 episodes, I think, at that point. Reached out, I was like, "You guys don't have a podcast? Why? I'd love to do one for you, and you can get, we can work together." And they jumped at it, and they've been fantastic ever since, and have connected me with some very, very cool guests. One recently was Vince Gill, and that's like, for most Oklahomans, that's the peak, right? For me, I didn't have the context of who he is, didn't grow up here, but he's a golfer, and so we connected on that. But just someone of that kind of magnitude, I think, will now open the doors to others. So they've been fantastic, and I will continue to work with them as long as they want to have me.
Well, how'd you get to Oklahoma, man?
So I grew up playing golf. Golf's my main sport as a kid, and my granddad gave me my first golf club when I was 3-4 years old. I still have it today. It's in my office here. It's got a wooden shaft in it. It's that old. It's got dots in the face instead of lines as grooves, as most golfers know. I somehow managed to save it from my nieces and nephews back home because it's just been passed down. I went home for Christmas one year. I'm like, I'm taking this with me. This needs to be in a case somewhere. So golf's always kind of been in my life. It's when I look back at every relationship I have, everything's kind of come from golf. I can always tie it back to a connection within the sport. Was really good at it from a young age, naturally, and then worked at it. Had friends older than me that kind of, they'd gone to the States, right? They were going, and university back home's 3 years, and golf is sort of like a kind of intramural type situation. They have golf teams, but anyone who's on a university golf team is kind of doing it for a club, for fun. The winters back home are terrible. Like it's not like you go to university back home to go to university. You don't go as an athlete like it is out here. And so I always had the dream to come to the States. I didn't care where that was. I wasn't really focused on what my degree would be. It was just like, I want to go to the States. And so at the time, there was 3 agencies that you kind of could sign up with, and they would, put you on their website and market you to golf-specific agencies. Now there's like 15 to 20, right? Yeah. They're all sports. They're just getting kids into the States, and the colleges know where to find them. And so I hooked up with this guy. His name is Lorne Kelly, and he owned a company called Pro Dream USA, guy in Scotland, and he'd played high-level golf, and he'd been to the States. And when he did it in the 90s, he was writing letters to schools. Yeah. And he just got a letter back and was like, yeah, we'd love to have you into coastal Carolina. And so I got hooked up with him, flew up to Scotland with my dad. We did a promo video and a whole profile thing, and he submits it to his website and just waits for the coaches to, it's like eBay for college golf coaches, right? They just scroll profiles and looking at videos, and I got a call. I graduated in 2009. So I got a call kind of early 2009 saying, we'd love to offer you a scholarship. It was to a place in Florida called Nova Southeastern, pretty good NAIA school at the time. I was like, yeah, done. Florida sounds awesome.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, never been to the States before. I go on family vacations to Spain and Portugal, close stuff, for a week with family. And
yeah, just Portugal.
Yeah, nothing. Well,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, yeah, it sounds awesome coming from the States. For us, it's just like, quick hop across the water is like a 2-hour flight. The longest flight I'd been on up until that time was 4 hours, and that was to Turkey. And at the time I was just like, 4 hours on a plane? What? So yeah, I was pumped. I was going to go out that August, and we got about a month out from me going, and the company my dad worked for went out of business, and so my dad didn't have a job. So the money that was saved to put me through my first semester was now putting food on the table.
There you go.
My parents did everything for me and my brother. I never grew up without. My dad worked on the side to pay for us to go on vacation. I mean, I owe everything to my parents. But it wasn't. It's not like the golf parents that you have in the States. Most golf country club parents, they've got cash.
Yeah.
Right? Total opposite back home. And so all my friends went off to university. I went to work at the local golf course. And honestly, I lived the dream for the next 2 years. I pulled pints of warm beer for crusty old men at the golf course for 2 years. Like, I didn't start work till 11 o'clock in the morning. I never worked really later than 5 or 6. I played golf morning and night. Like, it was awesome for me. But there came a point I'm like, this is not, I looked at my bar manager who's like 60, has a drinking problem, has been in the bar industry for his entire life. I'm like, I don't want to be that person.
You're like, there's got to be an alternative.
Yeah, and so we talked to my dad, I talked to my mom and dad, and was like, look, I'd love to reapply. Let's figure this out. How can we make this work? And so we reapplied. I reapplied late. I reapplied in like May, which is not the time to apply to go to school, right? That fall. I had one offer, and that offer was from Southern Nazarene in Bethany, Oklahoma. And I'm like, where is Oklahoma? What is a Nazarene? I had no idea.
You're going to get dropped into the center.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a religious household. My nan went to chapel for social reasons, and that was because it was around the corner from her house, right? So it was like, yeah, let's go. I got on the Skype call with the coach at the time, and I thought the connection was so bad because he was talking so slow. And then I got out here and he was like, that's just how people talk here compared to people from Wales. And so, yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And they offered me a 50% scholarship for that, that first year. And I, went to my dad and I was a member of 2 golf clubs at the time back home. And when I say golf's totally different back home to it is here, my membership, I wasn't paying membership at either of those golf courses because I made my national team. If you play for your national team, golf is free.
Wow.
But even if I wasn't paying, the membership dues for an 18, 19, 20-year-old were like $500 for the year, right? Golf is very cheap back home. So I was a member at 2 places. Some people here, they're like, oh my gosh, you remember 2 country clubs? Like, how much money do you have? No, total opposite. So I went to both of those. One of them, we had a golf day. We had a fundraiser golf day, and then the other one, we had a dinner and an auction. And so both of these clubs that I'd played at since I was a kid, kind of really rallied behind me and had a huge support and raised, I think we raised like £9,000, which paid for first half of my year, really. They paid for my first year. And it was incredible. Again, owe everything to them too. And it goes a lot to say about the relationships you build through golf. They'd see me grow up. They'd see me morning and night out there in the summer. My mum dropped me off with £5-10 for the day or maybe less. And we just play golf all day, right? I think those days are missed now. Kids don't do that anymore. And if they do, maybe they're at country clubs and running around doing other things. They're not just like literally playing golf all day,
literally
right?
Playing golf,
yeah. And so I came out August of 2011. It was August the 17th, 2011. I land, jeans and a hoodie. It's raining back home. It's 50. It's miserable. I land here and it's like 105.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, what have I done to myself? I'm melting. I've been on the plane, been up, 20 plus hours, never flown this far. And then drive, we picked up a rental car. I remember coming to like the first like stoplight in the rental car, and this tiny little rental car. I look across and I'm like looking at like the wheel arch of like this massive truck. Right. And to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a monster truck. It's just a lifted F-150, right? But to me, it was like the biggest thing I'd ever seen on the road. We drive up to Southern Nazarene, and I'm like, this is the drive from the airport up Meridian is not a glamorous drive. And I'm just like, what have I done? Right. Like I just turned 21 at that point. I was about to turn 21. I was 21 in the September. So close to being 21. And, you know, I'm not 18 years old, right? Like I'm an adult at this point. And I was still just like so unfamiliar. I'd never been away from home, right? And I remember the day my dad was there, moved me in, you know, and he's there like a week. And I remember driving to the airport to take the rental car back, you know, and the drive to the airport felt like it took forever. We pull in and I'm just like said goodbye. I just like hugged him and I, you know, said, I'll see you later, which I won't see you until 4 months time, Christmas. And I just remember walking out of the airport, like sobbing, and like, I'm on my own now. That was like the first realization of, okay, you need to grow up a little bit, you know, and my international advisor picked me up from the airport and she's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. And I'm just like crying in the car to myself, like on my own. And that was 2011. I mean, I didn't have an iPhone. Like it was Skype, you know, it wasn't FaceTime. And you know, I just, the weekdays were good because you'd practice and go to bed. It was the weekends that were the hardest because after 6 o'clock, you know, that everyone's 6 hours ahead back home. So kind of after 6 o'clock, everyone's in bed. So those weekend nights were pretty tough. And also I found out that first week that I was ineligible my freshman year. So I'd flown 4,000 miles across the world to play golf and I couldn't play my freshman year. I was so mad. You know, you just like
great surprises.
Yeah, right. And my coach was, we as far as I know, they fought it pretty hard, and basically it came down to, you know, the NAIA clearinghouse thought that those 2 years I took out of high school to work at the golf club were like professional years, so they took 2 years of they took 2 years of eligibility. Fortunately for me, the school actually transitioned after 1 year into Division 2. So I actually got those 2 years back.
Oh, that's
or
great.
A year back at least. But yeah, man, it was, God, I hated it when I first moved here, right? I miss home. It's miserably hot. I can't play golf to the competitive level. I'm like, what am I doing here? I didn't come here to go to school. I came here to play golf, you know? But I got used to it. Like I said, I turned 21 that September. And then I had a very international team. And so one of he won't mind me saying this now, but my assistant coach, who's from South Africa at the time, said, I know it's your birthday on Friday. I think you need some sense of home. Let's go and have a beer. And that would have kicked us out of school. You know, like we signed a lifestyle covenant. You're at a Christian school. Like I would have lost everything. And he's like, just don't tell anybody. Well, you know, there was 5 or 6 of us international students and we went to Edna's in Oklahoma City. People listening will know that one. And, woke up with a very sore head the next day, and that was kind of a turning point, whereas I felt like I had guys around me that understood home.
Yeah.
They'd grown up around home, and they knew how, as simple as it is just to go for a beer, right? You know, and yeah, of course, like we were kids, we risked everything at that point, but we didn't realize how bad it was or how much we were risking. But that really kind of, it's like that bonding thing, right? You bond over doing sports, you bond over having a beer together or going to a concert, whatever it is, like that really kind of made it switch in my head. And from then on, I just kind of focused on practicing, and I had a timer on my phone of when to go home for Christmas. Just counting down the days till like December, whatever it was, till I flew home.
Wow. Well, you end up going all in.
Yeah.
You end up going all in on Oklahoma. You have something called This Is Oklahoma.
Shocking, right?
It's shocking. So how did you end up sort of going from playing golf in college, being here, to saying like, man, I'm all in on this place, and I'm going to stick around to the degree that I'm going to start selling the property that's here.
Right. Yeah. So as the big shift for me, again, another big shift happened. I went home that first semester and got to see all my friends, but I realized nothing had changed. And you know, I've been away for 4 months, right? Which I thought was a lifetime. I've gone home. All my friends are still at the same bars. They're doing the same things on the weekend. There's no real entrepreneurial culture back home. It's very 9 to 5. And so, and at this point, kind of my friends are sort of getting close to graduating their universities and getting into work as well. So they're all talking about, you know, what jobs they're going to do. And like, this life sounds terrible to me. Like, I've never really been one to do the 9 to 5 thing. And so I've always kind of had aspirations to either work for myself or just do something different, right? Just kind of like, you know, go out and you can always get a job, right? You can always kind of fall back. And for me at that point, I realized if everything didn't work out, I could always move home and get a job and, you know, go about the life like everyone else seems to go about their lives. Part of me just didn't want to do it. And so when I realized that, you know, I went back to the States that semester and had a different mindset. And again, that was just reinforced when I went home that summer. And every time I kept going home, it just kept getting reinforced that you have a real opportunity here. Like, don't mess this up or like take advantage of it. And I think that helped that I was a little older in school too. You know, I was 21 my freshman year, and
For sure.
you know, I just had more like awareness, I guess, because when you're 18, you're just like, oh, we're having a great time, and you don't really think about the future. Whereas I was 21, 22, 23, you know, into my, you know, kind of freshman, sophomore, junior year. And it came to like my junior year, and I'm like, okay, like I'm going to stay out here. And how do I figure that out? And when you're an international student, I'm pretty sure it's the same now, but at the time you could do a 1-year work visa as long as it was related to your degree. And so I had a marketing degree. I can find a job in marketing pretty much everywhere. But I wanted to treat it as a gap year. I didn't want to work full time again. I was like, if I can find something I can weave in and out of, make a little money, travel, you know, enjoy it before I have to like figure everything out properly. And so one of my professors connected me to a guy who he played golf at SNU with, you know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years before I did, who was in real estate. Connects me to this guy. I meet him, and I'm like, I know nothing about the real estate industry, but I like to play golf. I don't like to work, you know, in the morning, 9 to 5, but I don't mind working evenings if I get to play golf in the day. And he's like, I think you'd be good at real estate. You know, you're different, you stand out, you seem like a guy who's comfortable talking to new people and just having a conversation. You're not, you know, you're not socially awkward, or just, you're comfortable, right? There's a lot of people who they hate. Like if we said to some people, go out and make 10 new friends today, they're like, no, I'd rather write a 1,000-word essay on why I don't want to do that. I just felt comfortable. And I think that comes back to golf too. I'd played golf with all my granddad's friends, and you know, play golf with different people, and you just get used to having a conversation with the older generation. For me as a kid, I just got used to having conversations, and it's so easy to do looking back on it. At the time, you don't think about it, but you know, it's simple to just, and I do it today. It's who, you know, who, why, what, when, how. Like those are the easy ways to keep a conversation going. Someone talks to you and you're like, well, who did that? Or why, right? Why is the easiest question. But parents, when their kids ask them why, they're like, I don't want to answer that question, right? Why is not what you want to hear from your kind of 4-year-old kid. But to keep a conversation going, it works. And so, you know, I'm junior year, I apply for this 1-year work visa, I get it. I'm going to go into the real estate industry after I graduate. Works out fine. And actually, I met a woman at that time, and how I stayed was we got married. And so we got married. So I got my green card effectively. And so that was kind of a huge part, right, of getting a job, you know, getting a wife, basically finding a woman that you fall in love with, and going through that whole process of immigration. I mean, it's not an easy process. You know, you basically got to put your entire relationship in a binder and send it off to the government and prove that it's legit, right? That you're not just coming over here. And it moved really fast, but you know, I got my green card, you know, we got married and all that stuff. So I stayed that way. But I fell in love with real estate because it was just a way to connect with people. And, you know, with real estate, it's such a big purchase, but it's also such a meaningful purchase, right? You know, people buying their first home, or, you know, they're buying a home when they graduate college and they're getting their friends to rent from them. And that's kind of what was my selling point at the beginning. You know, all my friends had graduated and they were all like, someone thinking about the apartment life. And I'm like, why don't one of you buy a house and then you guys can rent? You know, someone's parents has got enough money to help you. Oh, yeah. Like then all their friends would rent. And so that was kind of like how I started. And it just slowly kind of moved from there. And at the time, I was working part-time at Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club just to play golf for free. You know, I would work in the cart barn, load people's bags. I mean, it's not a fun job, but you're around high net worth individuals who are like golf, right? And as a college golfer, they knew I could play golf. And so I'd get invited to play golf with them. I played more golf than I worked. I took full advantage of the position I was in. Yeah. You know, try and build those relationships. And one day, one of them came to me and said, what do you think about commercial real estate? I mean, it's real estate. It's just big buildings, right? He's like, well, kind of. And he's like, but I have an opportunity. We're hiring. I think you'd be great. You know, would you consider an interview? Sure. Like I was, you know, residential, you know, was great, but you know, I've always kind of strived for bigger and better. And how do you, you know, just go to the next level, right? And the next level at the time was, you know, you could go sell a $3 million building, right? Instead of, or a warehouse to whoever, industrial, whatever it needs to be, office building, you know, versus a $250,000 house to your buddies, or $150,000 house at that time. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So did the interview, and I was open. I was like, I know nothing about commercial real estate. So that was kind of like my first, like, sort of 9 to 5. I was there 6 months, hated it. Just, I didn't learn much. I didn't enjoy it.
Leases, sales.
Yeah, everything. Just
Okay.
like starting out fresh in Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma City is such a small town that like all the commercial guys, it just wasn't, it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
And so after 6 months, I think my parents had come to town, and I just wasn't in the office, which is not surprising that they didn't want me to come back after my parents left town. I get a phone call, and where are you today? I'm like, I took my parents shooting in the middle of nowhere, countryside, right? Dad loves it. And my phone, no cell signal, and I get home, my phone's like blowing up. It's like, it was like the boss. And she's like, where have you been? I'm like, I was honest. I'm like, I just took my parents in town, I took them shooting, because I was used to real estate, just doing whatever, right? And up until that point, I didn't realize didn't feel like I was doing anything in the office anyway. Just like sitting there all day. I'm like, this is driving me nuts, right? And so when I went back in that Monday morning, I come to the office and sat there, walk in the office, and the lady from HR was there. And I'm like, before we go through this awkward conversation, I know where this is going, and it's okay. Like, I'll pack up my stuff and leave. Like, we don't need to go through this. Hey, we think you're great, but no, just here's my keys. I understand. And I guess I stopped them from saying you're fired, but I got fired basically. And that was the catalyst to starting This Is Oklahoma.
Okay.
Because I went home, and driving home, I'm like, well, I just got fired. The first time ever that no one had said it, but I just got fired. And I kind of like doom scrolled social media for 5 days trying to figure out, I knew I would go back to residential real estate because I never really gave it up. I was still doing deals and stuff. But I saw a Gary Vee video, and it was just like, you should become the social media mayor of your town, and this is how you should do real estate. And I think his sister was in real estate at the time, so he was doing the content around that. I just struck a chord with me. I'm like, I'm always on my phone. Like, why don't I try and do something that turns it into a business and build a pipeline through social media? And so I think This Is Us was on TV at the time. I didn't watch it, but I was like, oh, This is Oklahoma. It sounds awesome. Let's do it. The name was available. And I have a passion for photography. I did a few photography classes in college, and I've always kind of like loved that stuff. Never been really good at it, but just like, I appreciate how good, people are at it. And so people love sunsets, tornadoes, right? And like all those posts and photos, like they do really well on social media. So there was a page called Only in Oklahoma. It's still up now. And I researched them, and they have an Only in Arkansas, Louisiana. Like they're a massive kind of social media business, whatever. But they only posted like once or twice a day, or reposted once or twice a day. Like, I can do this, but I can repost every hour, right? So I just started doing that every day. And for the next year, I made no money at all in real estate. I had probably made $35,000 that year. Like, it was not good. But I was building this brand and had the long-term thing of like, oh, this is going to become something. I'm going to have a pipeline. I'm going to be doing deals all the time. The man math of like, how many houses can I sell? And I like about a year, that was June of 2017. May of 2018, the podcast started. Because I got to the end of the year, and I think I grew to like 10,000 Instagram followers at the end of the year. And I was like, I want to tell stories. You can only tell so many stories through pictures. How about we start a video series? Went to my friends who are college friends who were in the videography world. Hey, can we record like an intro video to the Facebook page to say, this is what we're going to do? So he sits me down, kind of like the setup we have here, in front of a camera, lights, everything. And I sucked at it. Like, I have so much appreciation for people who sit in front of a news camera and just talk, because I cannot do that's a real skill. And he's like, I can see he's getting frustrated because I'm just not getting it, and he's like, putting like the lines that I need to read on the camera, and it's not working. And he just says, what about a podcast? I'm like, sure. Like, he's like, we've got all the equipment. I think that's where you suit best. It was a nice way of saying video is not for you, pal.
Yeah, you got a personality for radio.
Right, basically, yeah. And so I took him to dinner, to lunch after that, just to say thank you and sorry for wasting your time. But those guys, Ian Weston and Alan Brown, gave me my first podcast setup. I still have it today. And they said, look, use this as much as you want. We'll help you edit. We'll get you started. And just pay us back whenever you start making some money. And so the first 50 episodes, they edited all of them. And still to this day, Alan's voice is the intro and outro to the podcast today. Still, we're at 600 and something episodes now. And I just fell in love with it. And they said, go out and record 5 episodes and come back. It took me a month. It didn't take me long at all to go record 5 episodes. They didn't expect me to do that many in such a short amount of time. One of them, the kind of turning point, because the goal was start a podcast, have a cheesy real estate ad at the beginning, and then go into whoever the person's story is. And I interviewed Todd Vincent from E11 Coffee, and I pull up to the warehouse there at the time. We hang out for an hour. We hang out for about 30 minutes, just talking about life, drinking coffee. Then we record for an hour, and then we hang out and finish another coffee pot after that. I'm like, I haven't had a conversation like this maybe in my life. Just a deep conversation over coffee with someone I've never met before. And at that point, I hadn't recorded the intro for the real estate advertisement part of it. And I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. I'm just like, the guest, it's their story. It's not about my cheesy real estate ad. And at the time, I don't think I had enough self-confidence in my real estate ability, because I'd gone through kind of like a weird transition of like, oh, you're a commercial agent, you're a real estate agent. It wasn't, the passion wasn't in real estate at the time, but I found this. I like to have conversations, and I like to learn about people and just kind of really get to know them on a deeper level. And yeah, you see this E11 coffee brand, but who is Todd? Why did it start? Right. And just like, what makes him tick, and why did he decide to do this? And from that moment, I'm like, there is no real estate ad, where it's just going to be podcast, and we'll figure out the real estate as well. I'll still make money from it, but right now let's just do the podcast and keep it that way. Again, no money came in from the podcast until 2 years later, when the Hall of Fame signed up. But it was February of 2020, they signed up for a 12-month sponsorship, which I got that, and I was like, I'm rich. Like I after 2 years or 18 months of really working at this, like I've made some money from this. This is insane, right? All my friends, the Instagram following is growing, and I'm reposting people's photos. None of it's my own content, but I'm just like slowly building this brand. And all my friends, I'm not talking about real estate on the Instagram either, just reposting photos of the state and sharing the love of. And the one thing that I love about Oklahoma, and I love about just the states in general, is that everyone, when they travel, has state pride. They wear something from their state, right? No one does that back home. And I really noticed that. I was like, there's something to tap into there. So let's tap into that. And at this point, I live here. This is home to me. Like as much as my mom would kind of joke, or I'd kind of wind my mom up and say, I'm going home now. She's like, no, home is here. Home will always be here. I'm like, well, I have a house, like home, I'd always kind of say that. But it just kind of snowballed. I always thought, and I still do real estate today, but it's different now. Like people, back in the day when I was trying to sell houses, I'd have to bring up real estate in a conversation with people, which is a lot harder to sell, because they can see through, they know they're being sold. They can see straight through you, right? Whereas now everyone's like, who's the podcast guest this week, and how's real estate? They bring it up. Are you still doing real estate? And so I created on the side a page called This is Oklahoma Homes, just to kind of reshare the real estate content. But yeah, it just snowballed, and I just fell in love with doing interviews. And during COVID, I was doing 3 a week, because everyone was over Zoom and everyone had all the time in the world, right? So I did like 150 interviews in June 2020, because I just sat at home, just like, oh, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, done. Like it's 30, 45 minutes to sit with someone that's got nothing to do anyway. That kind of really leaped, and that also helped the reps. It's like when you have a conversation, you learn the intricacies, and especially over Zoom, it's hard. I much prefer recording in person than over Zoom, because you get those keys, right? So yeah, it just kind of snowballed. The Hall of Fame introduced me to the Chickasaw Nation. I interviewed Governor Anna Tubby, and then a few months later reached out and said, hey, like I'm doing this project. I will be doing this for the rest of my life until I can have a voice. Would you consider being a sponsor? And they've been a sponsor for the last 2.5 years now. It'll be 3 in September. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And you had people reaching out, hey, would you interview this person? And, it went from 1 episode a week to kind of 2 to 3 during COVID. And now it's back to 2 episodes a week, Tuesday, Fridays. Wow. I can't explain it. I just love, you sometimes maybe on the podcast, you've been around people and there's examples. When you find something, you just kind of, you grab onto it, right? You're like, I will do this for the rest of my life, even if I don't make any money from it, because it's just fun to sit here and chat and get to know people. And I said this on a previous podcast, whenever do we sit across the table from someone with no phones and have a conversation, right? It doesn't happen anymore, because people think it's weird. I joked, I said, if I were to come to you and say, man, we've known each other for 10, 20 years, and how are you doing? Hey, let's go have a chat. Like, you okay? Is everything okay? Right?
What are we about to talk about?
Right? You think something bad's going to happen. Like, no, I just want to go hang out and have a conversation about life, family, career, whatever it is. Now we just have to sit in front of microphones and a camera to do it.
Yeah, and that's a real thing. Well, there's a couple of things that one of the questions I really want to unpack with you is, there's in real estate, you're balancing two sides. You got the marketing side, and then you got to actually know how to do the work, right? Negotiation, all of the things. But I think it's so do you have somebody going to get the introductions to meet these people, or is it kind of all you?
It's all me.
It's all you. Yeah. See, that is, I think, is a key. So there's two things, because I was in real estate for a long time as well. And the whole man, how do I know somebody is going to want to do a transaction at some point. How do I have that conversation? I think that's really important, because you kind of got to be known for two things. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the thing that's easy to talk about can get you the opportunity to talk about the thing that's tougher to talk about. I think that's a real secret there, that you're doing the networking, you're doing the connections, you're known for this one thing and this other thing. I think that is a secret to real estate that a lot of people don't really talk about, is how do you do your thing? It's actually two things. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And for me, I was known when I first got here for, hey, that's Mike the golfer, right? And over the last 2 or 3 years that's Mike the podcast guy. Because the people in the podcast world have no idea that I played college golf. And it's really funny when they find out, and it's really refreshing when they find that out too. But I couldn't agree more. Whatever it is that your passion is, I like cars and I like golf, right? And I, like most men, took on too much early on. I started a golf podcast, I started a car podcast, and now I just have one because it's just too much to do. Yeah. But the reason I did that was because of, you're in and around those people, like-minded people, right? And, if it's golf, start a show around golf. And podcasting, I think, is the easiest way to get in front of people that you want to meet, right? Because I've sat in rooms with people that there's no way if I didn't have a podcast, I'd sit across them. Because I want to, the typical, hey, I'd love to take you to coffee and bring you, pick your brain. Like, here we go. Right? They've had that 1,000 times. But hey, come on the podcast. Tell me about your story. Yeah. Where do you need me to be? Right. And then, you either ask those questions on the podcast, or you get those 15 to 20 minutes before and after to really ask the real question you wanted to, depending on the context. But the other thing too is no one's ever asked me how many people listen to my podcast. Right. So that's the other thing too. I've never had someone reach out to someone who's I had Larry Nichols on the podcast, Devon Energy, right? I'm asking him why'd you build one building? He's like, well, it was cheaper to build one than it was to build two. It's kind of funny. But then he goes in and dives in and tells this really impactful story about how, he's talking to, his dad is kind of in care at the time, and he would always go see his dad and tell him progress about the building and other projects he's involved in. And he lit up and spoke about that for 10 minutes. No one gets that, right? Only his close family gets that. But some random off the street that wants to pick his brain, no one gets that. So podcasting for me has been the easiest way to get in front of people that I want to meet, I want to build a relationship with. And then when you see these people, 6-8 months later at an event, or sometimes they're Oklahoma Hall of Fame events or chamber events or whatever it is, they recognize you because you shared a very impactful conversation with that person, right? You haven't just saw them for 15-20 minutes. You've really listened to them for an hour, tell their story and talk about what makes them tick. Right. Well, you also have this, in networking, you've got this brand affiliation where it's that person interviewed this other person. So somehow that whatever brand appeal that person has rubbed off on you, and they're like, yeah, but they talked to this person. Yeah. And then you get other intros. 100%. And back to what you said about, you kind of got to do two things, right? For me, it went from it being golf to now it's podcasting. And so I used the podcast, like you said, to do something at a high level to meet people. And they, they're like, oh, what do you do? Well, I actually sell real estate. That's my main career. I just do the podcast because I love doing it, but also it feeds, right? And everything I do feeds into real estate, right? The reason I joined the country club feeds into real estate. The reason I love cars and I'm around a lot of car guys feeds into real estate because they need a 3-4 car garage, whatever it is. Everything kind of feeds. I can help with that. Yeah. But it's just doing it the right way that comes across as organic rather than, hey, I see you have a 2-car garage and you have a car collection. You needed a bigger house. Yeah. Right? And just no, right? It's oh, talk to me about your cars. What are you going to buy? What's on the net? What's on the dream list? What are you building right now? Oh, I have a warehouse over here, but it's too far away. So these cars get neglected. And
okay, well, where do you live? How much garage space do you have? Have you thought about putting lift systems in? You know, and especially during COVID, people made a lot more renovations to their house rather than selling and rebuying. But yeah, like and because I've met so many people now, I add value to a lot of people I meet because I know someone that they need to get to, right? Or they need, hey, I need new garage doors for my, people listening probably get a kick out of that, garage doors, for my warehouse. Great. I know a guy who's the best in the city that does, proper kind of roller shutter luxury doors, right? Or if it's glass, or it doesn't even have to be houses, it could be anything. But because I have this huge network of people now, the key is maintaining that network as well, right? Which is hard to do.
That's not exhausting.
That's a skill too, right? Yeah. And I definitely don't do a good enough job of that. I think that's one area I definitely need to improve on. But when someone comes to me and they're like, do you know anybody about this? Yeah, I do. That's really fun to have too, because then you're adding value to all these people, and then they remember that. And sometimes they're like, oh, we're gonna buy a house. Great. Let's get into it.
Well, something that you've really I'd say unlocked is the power of the network. Because it's almost like the law of attraction. You have a body of information. You have a lot of people that know you, and people tend to talk about you, and you tend to talk about others, right? I think that's really that is something a lot of people really, really struggle with networking, because they feel inauthentic doing it because it feels unnatural to them. So talk to us a little bit about like building the community, because you've got a digital community that you've been able to get kind of outside into the real world too. So talk to us a little bit about like your secrets of networking. And
it's fun, right? When you go to events and you know people by their Instagram names, right? And you meet these people for the first time, and you're like, oh, you're the people behind this brand, or you're the person behind this photography page, or whatever it is. And I would always get anxiety around, like most of my content is resharing other people's content.
You're a curator.
So curating is the like nice way to say it. I'm basically just stealing it and reposting it. And that's kind of how it was seen early on, because the following wasn't there. But now the following is at 158,000. People want to be reposted by the page and the brand.
Yeah.
And so I went up to these two girls who have been best friends since, super young age. They have a page called Keeping Up with OKC. And they started it because it was an excuse for them to get together and stay in touch, right? They're both older now, they have careers. And we were at like a similar event together, and they introduced themselves. And I was like, oh, I reshared all your stuff. And they said, no, thank you, because we really appreciate that. That was the first time that I'd had that, from like, why are you resharing my stuff, to we get a lot of engagement out of you resharing it. And so that was a shift to seeing that I'm actually adding value, not just stealing content. And randomly I still get, I had one the other day, I reshared, and right now the page is at a spot where early on I had to ask everybody, hey, I'm going to repost this, do you mind? No, go ahead. Now I just go ahead and do it. But very rarely do I get someone reach out and says, hey, can you take that down? Yeah, no big deal. Like I won't repost any of your stuff. Like I respect it. Sorry I didn't ask. Done. And so it is what it is, right? But you're right. It's meeting those people, and how do you take that 150,000 people and turn it into 30 people that show up at an event, right? And that's the hard part, because it's easy for someone to sit on their phone, scroll around. But when you have an event that people come to, or you say, hey, I'm going to be at this event, would love to meet up with everybody. Let's go and hang out. I'm going to be in a black t-shirt with this Oklahoma logo on it. And people do. And I think I didn't do events for a very long time. I didn't put myself out there, and I didn't put my face on it for a long time either. I've only started doing that in the last kind of 6 months to build my personal brand up a little bit through some coaching advice I'd had. Because I'd always kind of felt a little weird about, hey, I'm the guy from Wales that's talking about Oklahoma, right? And when people find out, I did a voiceover of a reel the other day, and someone commented, oh my gosh, where are you from? I had no idea that like you weren't from Oklahoma. Like, this page has been going because I'd never put myself out there, and like people are starting to figure that out. But yeah, exactly. And people think it's exotic. I'm like, well, it's not, but I understand. And everyone over here loves the royal family, and here's my accent. Like, whatever it is. But there is the skill, right? And I think it wasn't intentional, but I think because I held held on for so long and didn't put my face out there for, what was that, 5 years, maybe more? 2018 to now. So yeah, it'll be 6 in June. You know, the relationship and the trust has been built.
Yeah.
Right. Which is hard to do, right? Because, you know, a lot of people, they want that sale now. They want to make those connections now and they want to do that. Whereas like that long-term build, like I said, it was unintentional, but I think that's what it is. And so looking back, you know, it's hard to say to someone, hey, you need to build something for 5 years and then start like, you know, not cashing in on it, but then giving yourself opportunities to take advantage of those.
Yeah, that's definitely the long game.
Yeah. And real estate slowly got better and better. And I moved into the luxury space because of the connections that I had made. And a luxury real estate agent reached out and said, hey, like he had been a guest on the podcast and said, I'd love for you to come work for me. Would you consider it? I mean, when I started real estate, that's what I wanted to do, was be in the luxury space. Because again, it ties into the country club world, the car world, right? It all ties in. And I'm not saying I sell $1 million houses every day, but like I still sell, you know, first time buyers.
Yeah.
But everything kind of connects. And that's one thing that like, if I can build that, you know, everything kind of works together, then I don't have to worry about, you know, something fitting into my life that's not, doesn't fit to the mission, I guess, right? Totally. Of the whole center of that. So the network kind of works in that way. And then it just ties into, you know, going to car events and being around. And again, being in the social media world, I've done some social media work for kind of local dealerships and stuff too. And that kind of gets me in the car world. And it all kind of been, like I said, people who have nice cars generally live in nice houses, right? Or they play golf or whatever it is. So the one thing I haven't tapped into is the watch market. I'm not a big watch guy, but that would probably be the next one that ties in too, right? Because people generally, you look at your average doctor, he's probably got a Porsche in the garage because doctors like drive Porsches and they're country club members and they got a Rolex, right? Like, do you think of those three? How do I center myself in that to take advantage of all those things to benefit my real estate business?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is you're adding value along the way too, which is pretty awesome. Well, one of the things that I heard, I don't know, I've heard you talk about is this idea of, and it's actually your TED Talk. You did a TED Talk and it was about saying yes. So talk to us a little bit about where that is. Cause you go from kind of this sort of, it's almost like arbitrage, like networking arbitrage kind of thing to now you've started talking about some of your ideas and this idea of saying yes. Talk to us a little bit about how did TED Talk come about? Yeah,
I changed it about 2 weeks leading into it actually. David Skidmore was my kind of coach and Amy all were like my coaches on that. And I was talking about, I think, opportunity maybe, because it's a lot of opportunity that I have taken advantage of. And then I look back and I'm like, it's because I've said yes to everything, right? And so I'm like, oh, there it is. Let's talk about saying yes. And at the time, people were just kind of coming out of COVID and it was just easier to say no, right? And they're like, what are the creative ways that we can just say no? I don't want to be there. I don't want to go to this. But we never know what we're missing out by not showing up, right? You can always show up to an event, don't like it, leave after 5 minutes. But you showed up to see who was there to figure that out. And maybe you get introduced to somebody. And so when I look back at my life, you know, I said yes to a lot of things and everything kind of started to make sense. And, you know, what's that quote that you go through the doors that open for you and just some of them, I don't know, I'm going to butcher the quote, but like naturally the doors will close around you and you just kind of keep walking through open doors and the ones that need to close will close themselves. Something like that anyway. So I look back, you know, and I said yes originally to go into the States, right? Like I was going to go to Florida. That didn't work out. Great. I said, I had one offer to come to Bethany, Oklahoma, in the middle of nowhere, right? The first time I wrote the word Oklahoma, I put, I think I wrote OAKL. Like, idiot. English education is not great. My literature skills are not great. Shout out to my aunt for getting me through my classes in high school. She's a professor at Oxford. So yeah, I'd said yes to come into the States. Never been to the States before, right? Didn't know what a Nazarene was. Didn't know where Oklahoma was. But I know that I don't want to stay here. And I know that also I can always go home if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Said yes to being out here. You know, said yes to staying, right? We're trying to stay here. Said yes to going into real estate when I knew nothing about real estate. Said yes to going into commercial real estate. That one didn't work out. That door naturally closed itself. said yes to, to a Gary Vee video, starting, a social media brand around telling stories. That goes into other stuff. I said yes to starting a podcast when the video route didn't work out. So all of these things, even though some of them haven't worked out, I've always looked at always said yes to those opportunities because, what if they do work out, right? You meet these people, and there's a few occasions where you say yes to something and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I'm going to say yes and I'm going to figure it out. And if you do figure it out, people see the value that you've put in, the energy and the work that you've put in. And I think the universe rewards you for that, right? And people see the hard work and see what you've done. It's a yes to podcasts that I didn't think that, guests that have reached out. And right now, the podcast guest, I reach out, but sometimes now it's got to a stage where people refer me guests. And I'll do a little work, and now I'm just, let's do it. Let's see what can happen. And some I've turned into some of the best episodes and people I've ever met, right? You never know. And so we kind of came out of COVID saying no to everything, right? Because it was easier to say no. Oh, I don't want to go to an event because I got COVID or whatever it is. I'll just kind of use COVID as an excuse. And people were just kind of in their shell. And I'm just like, what are the opportunities that you're missing? And to give it some context, it's got to come back to, if you're unhappy and you're saying no to everything, then
there's something to change.
There's something to change, right? If you're really happy and you've got a great job and you've got a great relationship and you're saying no to going to an event because, you want to stay at home with your kids, by all means, that's what you need to do, right? Like, say no to that. And it does go the other way. You can say yes to too much, right? So the TED Talk was directed at those people who were unhappy in their job, unhappy in their relationship, unhappy in whatever it is that they didn't like. Say yes to more things, and that will lead to more opportunities. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least right? Of course, it'll naturally, by saying yes to everything, it'll figure itself out, but then it also tips the other way. And then you can go back to start saying no again. So it's like this fine line of on the scale of like, okay, I need to say yes to everything to get out more and meet more people and, maybe find a business connection or maybe find a relationship, whatever it is, to I've been saying yes for, 18 months straight now. And I need to like rein it in. But you're in such a better place because you've said yes the whole time rather than being back where you were 18 months ago, unhappy. So
that's amazing. That's an amazing observation. People, like when you realize that you're unhappy, like not everybody's always paying attention to that. Am I happy? Am I unhappy? And if somebody can say, why am I unhappy? And they can, that's a super simple thing to do, to go, why am I unhappy? And start paying attention to how often I'm saying yes or how often I'm saying no. That is a great kickstart to a new life for sure.
Yeah. And it's hard to do, right? I'm I don't have kids, right? I've got 2 dogs. So, it's a lot harder if you have family that relies on you to have a paycheck and have benefits, right? I was fortunate to be in a position where I could pivot and kind of do what I wanted, and my bills were, not as much as someone who has a family. But even in that case, there's still time in the day, right? Like after the kids go to bed, like if you really want to change something, you've got that kind of, what is it, that 8 to midnight or, early mornings, wherever it is that you can find time. Most people who work a 9 to 5, like there's 2 or 3 hours in the workday that they're not working, right? So how do you find something that you want to like go towards and say yes to? Yes, I'm going to do affiliate marketing. Yes, I'm going to start a social media brand or start a podcast, whatever it is that you want to do, learn something that transitions you into, and then eventually you'll snowball into that. One of my favorite stories from the podcast is a friend of mine, who's a guy who's now a friend, but wasn't before. Both him and his wife are from Brazil. They didn't know each other in Brazil. He worked at an oil and gas firm doing IT. They met at work and struck a relationship, got married, got married. And they started buying and selling things on the weekends, going garage sailing on the weekends. And they built up the business so much that the wife quit her job. And the husband said, hey, if you get to this, if you can like make more than if you can double your salary like monthly, you can quit. And it took her like 60 days, which is crazy, really? Right? Yeah. And this was kind of early on in like the garage sailing. Now it's kind of a little like overcrowded, but that they moved into doing stuff on eBay. And I mean, they're selling stuff all over the world. And they moved out of their apartment into a house. basically lived out of 2 rooms in the house. The rest of the house was like packing and shipping. And she found her kind of niche and passion in plus size women's clothing. And so they have a business. They have a warehouse now. They're now in their second warehouse. They have a warehouse that they moved into a beautiful new home, kept the other one as a rental, bought a warehouse. They have 5 or 6 employees, and they're a fully online business. And they were, I think, on the Inc. 5000 list. We met because of the car world, because he has a $800,000 Lamborghini and she drives a McLaren. Like, they're the coolest people ever. Now they're having kids and they're traveling all over because their business runs itself. But it started from reselling, and they both work corporate jobs. And we did a podcast, and he's like, I was super, like, we were making double my monthly salary and as combined, and I didn't want to leave because I was so kind of tied in, right? The benefits and the risk. They took that leap. Now they travel the world with 2 kids. Like, last summer they bought an RV and just drove around the country with 2 little kids, right? And like, they work
running
in
their
laptop.
online business.
Yeah, it's incredible, you know? And I asked him, I said, what would you do if you started again? He goes, go straight back to garage sailing at Goodwill, just picking things up, reselling. You know, he said the thrill that you get for buying something for $2 and selling it, you know, for a 10, whatever it is.
Yeah. But
you do that over and over again. It's not glamorous work, but I mean, he lives in $1 million house, drives a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
Like, he's succeeded, you know, and that's like the full American dream, right? They're both from Brazil, you know, they're building a house, I think, in Brazil right now. Like, that's one of my favorite stories, because like, anyone can do that. Anybody can literally go and spend $10 at Goodwill, go on eBay and sell it for 20, and then spend $20 and just keep compounding.
They just can't. A lot of people, a lot of us struggle to connect the first $2 purchase to the $800,000 Lamborghini.
Exactly. Right. It's nuts. It's such a great story. And they, you know, and then they move into the, like, and that's what they do. They go to these big, she's got a great eye for clothes. So they go to these big buy a comp, whatever it is that she goes, makes orders, comes back, puts it online, marks it up, gone. And they've just built that brand.
That's amazing. That is amazing. It's an amazing story. It's amazing the lessons that you've learned along the way. And I think it's amazing for you to come here and share them. I wonder, what's kind of one piece of advice that you'd offer to entrepreneurs who are kind of still trying to find their way to that one thing that really sticks?
For me, it was finding something like you figure out what you want to do, right? Like, if you can wave the magic wand, how would you relive the rest of your life, right? Does that mean, you know, you're going to move? Does that mean you want to travel? Whatever it is. And then you kind of like, how can I build a business around that? That's how I looked at it. You know, I wanted to join a country club and drive a nice car. And I thought, how can I do something that I enjoy doing? And somehow, by saying yes to a lot of things, it worked out that I stumbled on podcasting. You know, I wouldn't be in podcasting if Ian and Alan didn't say, we think you'd be good at podcasting. So it just comes back to putting yourself in positions that you don't think are going to, you know, looking back, it makes a lot of sense that I have a podcast. I had a friend's in town yesterday, and he said to me, he's like, you were different. He was one of my professors in college. He said, you were different in college because you always stopped by to have a conversation. No, none of the students ever did that. And it's no surprise now, we were chuckling, it's no surprise that I have a podcast because I like to talk, right? I like to have a conversation. But when it goes back to figuring that out, you know, I had a golf club in my hand since I was 3 years old. So it's no surprise that golf led me somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then it became podcasting, right? So kind of going back to saying yes to things, but you've got to figure it out. You've got to start with a North Star. Like, what do you want to do, right? And there's levels to things, right? Like, we all have these levels. Yeah, we might want a bigger house. We might want to drive a nicer car. We might want to go on 2 or 3 different vacations a year, go on a safari, whatever those things are. Like, those are kind of like your anchor points. And then you figure out what you're good at and slowly learn, or figure out what you want to do and learn that. We don't need to go to university anymore, right? Everything's on YouTube, right? YouTube University, whatever you want to do. You know, there's people out there making tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on, you know, affiliate marketing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's still something that people are like, you should get into that, among a bunch of other things. But when I look back at my own story and how I try and relate that to people is, yes, I've said yes to a lot of things, but I also knew what I wanted, right? So it has to start with you can't just aimlessly say yes to things, because then you'll just fade into the distance saying yes to other things, and you'll wake up in 5-10 years and be like, I've done a lot of things, but I have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me, it starts with really figuring out what it is that you want to do. What's that first thing that you want to accomplish? For me, it was joining the golf course. Right now it's buying a Porsche, which I don't have one yet, but that's like my next thing. Because anyone who's ever known me has known that I've loved cars from a young age. You know, I don't really care about having a big house. I grew up in the UK. We don't have big houses, right? Like that's just the way it is. And I also grew up knowing, you know, from sort of a family that everything I have is enough. I didn't grow up with a lot, but I had all I needed. And so I came here with my golf clubs in a suitcase. And I have a lot of kind of strength and power that I pull from, knowing that I can go back to that and be totally fine. Right? Which is crazy to say, because I have a house now and 2 dogs and all the other stuff. But like if I was just to wake up tomorrow and someone was like, here's your golf clubs and here's a suitcase, I'd go like, great, let's go. I've done this before. Right? But it all starts, for me, you got to figure out what that point is.
I love it.
And then you figure out by saying yes to things, what you're good at, what doors are naturally going to close for you. And you just keep moving forward towards that. And you got to know it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah. Right? Like I've done 612 episodes now as we sit here today. I mean, since June of 2018, it's 2024 now, right? Like there's a lot of conversations in there, a lot of relationships, and you know, people would look at my real estate business and be like, well, you don't sell that many houses. And I don't. Like compared to like a lot of people who do all that stuff, I do 10 to 12 houses a year, right? I'm not out here like selling 50, 60 houses because I know if I did that, I would not enjoy selling real estate, right? Like I like where I'm at. Of course, I'd like to make more money. Who doesn't, right? But I have the ability to do 2 podcasts a week, meet awesome people that I know in 10, 15, 20 years, I'm going to look back and be like, oh yeah, remember we did that podcast? And now we have this amazing relationship, right? It's just, it's a strange way to look at it. For me, it makes all the sense in the world. But for everyone else, it's like, no, I want to sell a business. I want to make $100,000 in 6 months. Why? Right? Why don't you just like chill a little bit, build something with a fantastic foundation and a brand that's going to stand the test of time? You know, like my journey with the podcast is to 10,000 episodes. I've done the math. I don't do enough episodes a year to get to 10,000 by the average lifespan. So I've got to probably start another podcast, right? Which I will, and I have. I just need to kick it back up. But when you look that way and you break it down to daily activities of, okay, if I'm going to get to 10,000 episodes, how many have I got to do a week? There's your plan, right? No one thinks like that. Everyone's short-term gratification. I want to have abs now. I'm currently in a 6-month fitness journey with a bunch of guys. And it's the longest time I've ever signed up for a fitness journey. I've done like the 75-day ones and the 30-day ones, you know, and you always relapse and gain the weight that you've put back on, right? I'm excited about this 6-month one because it scared me to start. I didn't want to do it. I had to be convinced to do it, right? And 6 months is, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot amount of time. But 6 months eating clean with no alcohol, no sugar, I mean, it's like a jail sentence to some people,
Totally.
right? So I try and look at that long-term picture with everything that I do to see how I can fit in, how this works towards the goal, right? And then you just break it down to daily activities. But yeah, it starts with finding that North Star originally, whatever that want to be, what that first one is. I'm working towards that.
I love it. You got a North Star, a backup plan, and you say yes to a lot of stuff along the way.
The backup plan sometimes is like, you know, there's that burn the boats quote, right? And I think that scares me a lot. It scares a lot of people. My backup plan is knowing that I could always go home.
Yeah.
Right. Which I know I wouldn't enjoy because of the life that I've lived here and the life that I've been around, and the way of life here is so different to back home. And that's why I wanted to stay. But I know that there is some way I could figure it out and claw back out here.
I love it. Well, Mike Hearne, thanks for taking the time to sit in the seat with us at the Entrepreneur Studio.
It's been awesome.
Awesome, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.